How do you look after your brain? Your brain controls everything. All the functions which you take for granted, they're controlled by your brain, let alone all the stuff that you consciously do, like working and making decisions and having conversations with people and everything else that is in your awareness. So what are the things that you can do to look after your brain and to optimize your brain's performance? That's what we're going to talk about in this week's episode. I'm Jeremy Klein, and this is Change Work Life. Hello and welcome to Change Work Life, the show that's all about beating the Sunday evening blues and enjoying Mondays again. If you want to know how you can enjoy a more satisfying and fulfilling working life, then you're in the right place. We'd all like to perform better at work, but sometimes even when you're doing something you're good at, it can be a struggle. Maybe your mind wanders and you can't concentrate, or it just seems to be taking you longer to do something than normal. So is there anything you can do to help yourself in this situation? Are there ways you can improve your brain function to help you perform better? That's what we're discussing this week, and I'm delighted to introduce Dr Mary Rensel. Mary is one of the founders of Brain Ops Group, through which she runs programs and workshops to help improve brain performance and to build and restore brain resilience. Mary, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Why don't you start by taking a minute to introduce yourself and telling us what you're about?
Okay. Well, I'm Dr. Mary Rensel. I'm a neuroimmunologist, so a brain doc who looks and treats diseases that affect the immune system. And after doing that for nearly 30 years, I noticed, a lot of the information for folks who are working hard day to day, we just didn't have the ABCs, what the brain may need to help us focus and be productive and have clarity of how to keep work meaningful and exciting for us. So I wanted to dig into it, and I partnered with a life coach, Allie Hively, and we've created some very simple, instructive, programs to help folks, just, again, the ABCs of how to, manipulate or work with or shield your brain from, a lot of the risks of burnout, et cetera.
Is medicine still part of your work, or have you dropped that entirely in favor of this?
Yes. So I'm still working in medicine, and yes. But I think there's, daily things that we can do to optimize our brain and just learn a little bit about what's sitting between our ears, to help us support, our days being productive and actually fulfilling.
And how did you and Ali come to meet and decide that you were going to go into business together?
Yeah. So we met because I was giving a talk at a women's leadership conference, and she was in the audience, and she introduced herself afterwards. And I wasn't sure who was going to be at that talk. And I was talking about brain health, long-term brain health for professional women. And she came up afterwards and we were chatting. And I said, I love looking at the science and jumping into the research, but I need someone to help support changing humans, because as humans, we're super hard to adjust or change or, to put new ideas into our daily lives. So then we chatted and we put a group, we call it our Ocean 11 group together. We put a team together, and we met regularly with other professional women, try to share resources. And from that, we came to know each other and we started Brain Ops Group.
You talk on your website, and we've spoken about optimizing your brain. What does that mean, and what does it enable you to do that you weren't able to do before?
Well, again, I think just going back to some of the basics, it doesn't have to be super complicated, but I think number one, we have to acknowledge that the brain is an organ and it needs daily support. So we came up with a system that we're from Cleveland, Ohio, and around Cleveland, our town, we have a lot of CLE for Cleveland. Our little reminder of how to do this easily in a busy life is CLE. So number one, with the brains, what we really need and want and desire in a busy workday or even at home, in our communities, are connections. Obviously, so the CLE is connections, our lifestyle actions, and our emotional processing. If we had to think of 3 buckets of where to put our energy into, we recommend that you put your energy and attention toward connections, your lifestyle actions, emotional processing, because surprisingly, all of those activities that you do in those three buckets, those three areas, can actually enhance your work performance. So as a brain doc, I didn't see enough, literature or educational material supporting that our brain does need some attention and that there are daily actions we can take to help our focus, our productivity, and even, like I said, our happiness or fulfillment at work. So we like to break it down into simple areas of where to be active.
And what's the end result?
Well, it's nice when one has clarity of where to put your time and energy. It's nice. Also, it's a great feeling to know that you are putting your attention or your activity toward things that really matter. Obviously, our brain makes us who we are. It helps us remember special times in our lives. It helps us plan for the future. It helps us support those that we love. So if we know what it needs and we know how to get the most out of it, then we can have those days with good focus and good productivity so that we can get home to our loved ones or those that we care about or be active in our community so that work isn't taking over our whole 24 hours.
So what changes might someone notice if they apply this framework? And I promise that we will look at those elements in a bit more detail. I'm just looking sort of at the end result working backwards.
Right. So, it feels peaceful. I would say like a peace of mind on your weekly plan. Okay, so I need to put into my calendar times to connect with people. And this is outside of work. Inside of work also matters very much, but it really helps to have good, high levels of resiliency, meaning that we can adapt to change if we have this structure in place, the CLE. So number one, scheduling time and being very intentional about connecting with others. And also leaving time in your schedule for your healthy lifestyle actions. And then also learning a little bit of something about emotional processing. We don't have to be experts on it. We don't have to be psychologists, but we can know a little bit of something because it will influence our ability to focus, to be productive at work, and even our perceptions. What we see day to day will be influenced by our emotional state.
And do you ever know that you have cracked it, that you've got to where you want to be, that everything is in balance and harmony, or is this a continual process?
Well, I think something like resiliency is the ability to adapt to life's continual changes. So I'd say the only certainty in life is that we're going to continue to change and we will have to adapt. We don't have the same day after day. So that, building resiliency, which is a toolkit to be able to approach life and all the challenges or changes that we'll see with life. Once you know the go-to actions, it feels good to know where to go when life throws you a curveball, as it will. Even on if you want to say mundane or common days, it's nice to know that you are doing what's important to maintain that important organ, between your ears. And it's important also because it feels good that you're not wasting your time and energy on something that won't have long-term value.
You've mentioned resiliency a couple of times there. Can you just expand on what that means?
Yeah, so resiliency is defined as the ability to be adaptable to changes. If you want to think about going under or over or around the challenges that life may put in front of us, that is a life skill if we have high resiliency, people have high life satisfaction. They feel their quality of life is higher and their work productivity follows that. They have high work productivity because they feel empowered. They know what to do when life throws them a new challenge, which it will, right? I mean, if you live long enough, you have certain challenges that are put in front of you and you have to find a way to work around or over or under them in the workforce or even in your home life. And then there's ways, if the brain is supported, the brain is better able to handle those challenging times when we have to jump over or around a new struggle or a new, life challenge at work or even at home.
And is it a case of getting to the place where you know what to do, or is it more about being comfortable that something has come your way which you might not know how to deal with yet, but you're kind of comfortable that you will figure it out?
Yeah, I think it's both things. I think it's the confidence that you have this toolkit, that that if you have a strong social connection because you've worked on that and you have healthy lifestyle actions because you've worked on that. And then you also know how to process emotions because you know how to put those in place, even in a busy day, that you have that peace of mind that you know exactly what tools to keep in place if you've already been doing this. If this is new for you, one thing to acknowledge is that, the brain is a busy organ. It's working 24/7 on managing our whole body. And so if you ask the brain, hey, I'm going to, even listening to this podcast or thinking about taking on a new action, you have to remember that you need to give your body, your brain support when you're learning something new, because it's already busy. I think of it like a busy parent. If you ask the parent for a ride, can I have a ride to the store? The parent say, hey, I still have to cook dinner. I'm already doing things. The brain is something similar. It's already busy. So if you're asking it to learn something new, you have to give it more of these healthy lifestyle actions so that you can support it in change. Because it's an organ with, it can only handle so many things. So if you can't keep asking things of it without supporting it through these lifestyle actions.
I would like to take your framework slightly out of the order. So you mentioned lifestyle actions. I'd like to focus on that one first as being the one which kind of seems to me the one that's most obvious when it comes to looking after your brain. So, I'm sure you'll go into more detail, but things like eating properly, sleeping properly, that kind of thing. Is that essentially what we're talking about when you talk about lifestyle actions?
Absolutely. And also that the brain as an organ actually has a lot of fat in it. Is the content of the brain is filled with healthy fats. So when we look at our nutrition, we indeed have to make sure we have a nice range of nutrition for the brain. The other thing to remember is, again, it's busy 24/7. Even when we're sleeping, our brain is working hard. So we have to look at the nutritional balance we give the brain throughout the day. The other thing to know is that sometimes our emotional state, or we might call it our mood, say, I don't feel good, I feel tired, or I feel upset. Sometimes that's related to our nutritional state because the brain is exhausted from all the work it had to do. And we need to give it long-term good proteins and healthy fats to help us throughout the whole day. So sometimes we have that rumbling in our stomach because our brain is telling us, hey, I need some more fuel for this day. This is a big day. You've asked a lot of me today. You need to give it even extra fuel. So we have to kind of link those two things. Sometimes those, the rumbling stomach or the fast heart rate, sometimes that's because the brain is trying to turn on the metabolism because it's learning new things. So when we think of nutrition, we need to make sure we're eating long-lasting and pacing through the day, especially if we have a busy day, which sometimes as professionals, we do the opposite. We have a lot of meetings, we put a lot in our day, and we eat or sleep less because we have a big project coming up when actually we should be doing more.
There's probably, more material than any one person can possibly go through on things just like diet. So where can people start on this in terms of what is the right mix of fuel for the brain? There's, lots of received wisdoms around diet. So whether you have a third carbs, a third proteins, and a third vegetables, whatever it might be. In your experience, your research, your work as a brain doctor, what typically tends to work for people to retain brain function and keep it going and keeping it ticking over?
It's so hard to, like you said, there's so many individualized plans, and people may have medical conditions where they have to eat a particular way, or they're on certain medicines and they have to eat a particular way. So it's so hard to say this is the one plan. But I think, if you try to eat out of less boxes and bags and you eat the whole food and you make sure you have a good mix of protein at each meal and the healthy fats, which you can get a lot in fish. So again, back, the recommendation from, the American Academy of Neurology and some of the large institutions that look at long-term brain health, the Alzheimer's Association, those kind of big associations have looked into this. Seems like following a Mediterranean diet is the best plan for the majority of us. But definitely, people have to talk with their own physician about their family risk factors and their medical risks. But the Mediterranean diet, healthy, colorful foods that you could think of a beautiful little village in Greece or Spain, and what would you get if you lived somewhere there? You wouldn't be hitting, I don't know, in the US we have Costco, we have these big box stores where you get big boxes and bags of crackers and chips and things. That's probably what you wouldn't get if you were living in a cute, beautiful little village in Spain or Greece or somewhere, So beautiful, colorful foods. Sometimes we say try to eat 4 colors a day if you don't know where to start, but of real food. So if you get your berries and your strawberries and beets or greens, try to mix up the colors so that you make sure you have a good mix of vitamins throughout the day. But yeah, I would work with your healthcare provider and come up with a plan for yourself, particularly specific for your needs.
I presume that sleep also figures in the lifestyle box. So what can you say about that?
It sure does. Well, I think the one thing to think is that some of us have a self-imposed sleep deprivation. So some of our own activities, we keep ourselves from sleeping all that we need. And that can lead to poor decision-making, poor what we would call executive function. So those are like, how can we take data and come up with the big ideas in our work projects, et cetera. It might also affect our recall when we're trying to work on those big projects, or even our attention to details. So sleep is very important for work, productivity, and focus. So we have to be careful what we're doing to ourselves. So if we're, watching Netflix and we keep going another and another and another, and suddenly it's 1 a.m, we have to get up for an early meeting, that is self-imposed sleep deprivation. That will affect our attention, our big ideas, our ability to focus, our ability to take in information and come up with good ideas in the workplace. So we have to be careful with what we're doing to ourselves and our ability to sleep as we need.
And presumably the third leg of the stool is exercise. Would that be right?
Right. Mm-hmm. Some kind of movement. And even when you're working on a big project, the brain is, as we said, it's in the skull. It's very dependent on movement for good blood flow and to bring nutrients up to the brain. So it's good to move every 30 minutes. Some studies have suggested just sitting still for 30 minutes, you'll have less blood flow up to the brain. So just a little march or stretch or something, as people are on meetings for hours and hours, it's good to move every 30 minutes to make sure that the brain is getting kind of flushed and bring some new nutrients.
So I'm conscious that we've only looked at sort of one aspect of the framework, but I mean, everything that you've said, I think people intrinsically know. People know that having a decent diet, getting plenty of sleep, having a reasonable amount of exercise, it's all good stuff. And yet people still find it so difficult, whether it's perceived incompatibility with lifestyle. So, I mean, sleep and young children don't always go well together. Convenience food and being busy at work tend to go together. Lack of exercise and both of those could go together. So, yeah, help these people out.
Well, I think a quote unquote lazy way to, get maybe some more positive brain activity in is to hang out with people that do this, that you see, they follow a healthy diet, they move or exercise regularly. They seem to prioritize their well-being because as humans, we model each other. And so we tend to also feel kind of their emotional state. So if they are more of a positive person, that they said, yes, we're busy. Yes, we have little kids. Yes, exercise might look different today than it did when we didn't have any young children or work wasn't so busy. But still, I'm going to go ahead and do that 1 or 2 things I know will be important for me today. If you hang out with people that actually live like that, we will take on a lot of the actions that they will model for us. And we will also start to feel their emotional state. So that's a quote unquote lazy way of doing it, or in a very intentional, strategic way of doing it. So you might want to just sit back and take a little assessment, after the podcast. People can think about the last, 5 to 10 people that they have spent time with in the last week. And did they see them doing any of these kind of behaviors? And if not, you want to be intentionally kind of fill in the blank. Where do I see anyone who eats or makes a priority of eating healthy? Where do I see anyone making a priority of caring for themselves or stopping a meeting and saying, this meeting has gone really long. I'd like us all to take a break. go get, take a bio break, get some nutrients, stretch. If people are modeling this, those are the people to hang out with. And that's a great way to start and to just try one new activity. As humans, we're hard to change, but we have to acknowledge that we can change. It just will take us a little time. So we have to make it easy. We have to hang out with people already doing it. And we have to reward ourselves. So if you do something good, make sure you give yourself a reward for doing it, because otherwise it doesn't catch our attention too much if we let it slide by.
There's that expression, you are the sum of the 5 people you spend most of your time with, or something like that. And also something I've found with approaching things in a group way is just that extra accountability. So if you've made an arrangement to do some exercise with someone, or you're committed to a group exercise program or something like that, personally, I've found that has helped me stick to something which I wouldn't necessarily stick to if I was just doing it by myself.
Absolutely. Right. And the literature is very strong in this area to take some time and build those connections, whether it be for accountability or just to model some of these healthy behaviors. I mean, in the health literature, people live longer when you have these social connections, especially somebody who volunteers in the community, because then you also have an empathy. You feel you're doing something to help your community and you're connecting with others. So this literature, it seems like you said, like people know we should do it, but putting it into place is literally life-saving. And, that's what the literature suggests. People live longer when they have these connections, and it's actually fun, right? You actually can have a good time. So a lot of the brain health measures are fun. You get to connect, go out and have fun, eat beautiful, colorful food.
So what is it that connections does for your brain? Because I can see how fuel, sleep and exercise, that's the physical stuff. So you can see how you'll, metabolize all that, and it will affect your brain just as it will affect all parts of your body. But when it comes to social connections, what's the effect on the brain of that?
Yeah, it's almost like a shield for wellness or well-being to have that network. Again, if you want to think, if you're suddenly going through a challenge in your family or in your community, and you have a network of social support around you built in already, if you've already put some time toward this, if something happens, you probably have someone you can ask a question of. I see this if I am diagnosing someone. Let's say I diagnose someone with multiple sclerosis. If the literature suggests if they have a strong network, they will be healthier, because they have people they can go ask questions of, and maybe somebody knows somebody. So that it's literally our survival, as we know that humans are, we live in groups and we need to feel safe in our group. So we need to have that strong connection where we share those basic values of whatever may be important to you. Hopefully whatever's important to me, I have a network of folks who have similar values. And so those people I feel very safe with, and they are my support system, if, in day to day for fun and for connections, but also if there's a new challenge in my life, then I have that built-in network. And the other thing to acknowledge is that people are moving. A lot of times we're very mobile these days, and to be very intentional when you're new in a town to build that pretty quickly. I see a lot of medical residents. So our residents, kind of move to town sometimes from other countries, and, they're new. They don't have any connection beyond maybe the residents they're working with, and they stay very closely knit because they're their safe group. They understand what they're going through and they find resources for them. So it's literally life-saving, and definitely something to be intentional about in your weekly schedule to build your network.
How much is enough when it comes to a network? So taking your example of someone who moves to a new town, and there's lots of stuff that you need to do. You might have to, get kids in school and all that kind of thing. You still got the job. You're trying to maintain the healthy lifestyle that we've just been talking about. So how many people do you need to surround yourself with, and what should the quality of those relationships be?
That is such a great question, because the literature actually suggests that you could be spread out too thin. that there is a level that you could have too many connections, but they're not very strong connections. Again, this question will go to kind of the style of the person, whether they're a strong introvert, they probably have a smaller network. If they're more extroverted, they will have a larger network. But yes, that is a fair question. That there is a too much, where you don't know people well, you just kind of know them. But that matters for certain things like finding new jobs, et cetera. But your well-being, you want to have a tight knit circle, the people that really know you.
So how much is too little, or what number is above too little?
Yeah, it's a fair question, Jeremy. But I think that it depends on the person's style. Everyone has a style, and strong introverts could have 1 to 2 to 3 really good friends, and that's all they need. To have someone that, or even two really good friends. Strong introverts may have. If you're more extroverted, you would probably have a tighter circle of people who know you well. So there's different networks, right? So those are your friends that really know you, and you would be able to share very personal things with them. And then, other things like we talked about, like people that eat healthy and move. And so their network development is almost like a web, right? So we have our people very close to us, and then we want to be intentional about connecting with especially positive people who have positive health-related or well-being behaviors.
Would you include your life partner in that network potentially?
Absolutely, I would. Yeah. He's not listening, but I would. Yeah. He's not listening yet, but he will be listening, hopefully. Yeah.
Let's move on to the third aspect, emotional processing. I think you're going to have to start from the beginning with introducing what that's about.
Well, I think a lot of folks, me included, would think like that's kind of like a closet you open. I have a closet in my house I don't want to open. It's filled with so many things, and I know it'll take a lot of time to deal with that closet. And sometimes I feel like emotions are like that. But especially during COVID, I learned the practice of emotional awareness. So it's been suggested to, list 3 emotions 3 times a day. And just to see, it's just awareness, right? So not so threatening. You just list 3 emotions that you're feeling 3 times a day. And it's nice because it helped me to understand, I'm way more positive in the morning. I'm rested. I'm well fed, especially after breakfast. I can make it through the day. But as the day goes on around dinner or late afternoon, my emotions are more negative. So that's what I'm referring to when I talked about earlier, is sometimes our neurometabolism balance. We may link it to moods. Like I would say, I'm feeling upset or short-tempered or, later in the afternoon. But really, I was tired and I needed a snack, a healthy snack, So we see that like as we know that as parents, right? Like a lot of times the kids are crabby, they're tired and hungry. So we link those two, but sometimes as working adults, we don't always link those 2 things. So number 1, I would start with awareness, write down 3 emotions 3 times a day and just see what your daily pattern is. And then you can kind of prime it. So if you say, okay, my emotions are low in the afternoon, and then we always have that meeting at this time. If you have any way to adjust scheduling your day around your positive emotional state, that would be probably increase your productivity. If you don't, you have to prime yourself. Like you might, before that meeting, have to think of something you're grateful for, or take, a few deep breaths, or try to adjust your emotional state when you know that time of day is more of your negative emotional state. So we can adjust it a bit, but a lot of times it's going to take some neurometabolism adjustment and or recall and using some of the adjustments, emotional adjustments we can do with, pictures of people we love. A lot of people have that in the office, pictures, happy memory, or someone you might praise. That's another trick to get into more positive emotional state, is thinking of someone you could praise that day on your team, because it'll make you think of positive things and try to jolt you out of a negative state.
Okay, so there's kind of like a 3 times daily check-in, if you like. So presumably you write down what sort of the top 3 emotions that you're feeling at that point, whether positive or negative. So I'm feeling, I don't know.
Strictly for awareness. So it's no judgment. And you don't have to change them. It's just so you can learn your emotional patterns. Like I needed to do it for about 2 weeks. So it was very clear to me what my emotional patterns were. And I know, because why does it matter for a work day? Because emotional patterns will change my perception, my executive functions, my interactions. And so it matters what my emotional state is on how I enter a meeting. We've all seen someone come into a meeting in a negative emotional state and change the whole room. So we share a synchrony. So we want to bring our best emotional self into a meeting. It's not that we aren't going to have a range of emotions. We are, but we can, number one, be aware of what they are. Number two, we can adjust them a little bit if we need to. And then if somebody is always in a negative state, then that's where you get a professional help. If you seem like you're assessing yourself and it's mostly negative, then get a professional. Absolutely. Because there are therapeutic ways to help that.
Are there good times to do this to get a true picture? So, for example, I can predict that if I was to write down my 3 emotions immediately before eating breakfast, they would probably be quite different from as soon as I have had breakfast, because I tend to have a much better outlook on the world once I've eaten.
Yeah, and the brain is in a more of a sensitive state when you wake up because it's a low glucose time. So that's a lot of times why the experts recommend we don't go on social media right away when we wake up, because it's a vulnerable time because we're low glucose then, so that's not the best time. And you could do it, because if you know it's just awareness, right? So if you did it before you ate breakfast, you would say, okay, I see, I'm more negative before I eat breakfast. So then that would not be the time that maybe you'd have a big discussion with somebody, or you wouldn't plan your whole day right then, so then this awareness can then help you prime your day.
Are there any emergency fixes which you can introduce when you feel like you need them? So, mid-afternoon slump is pretty common. I definitely don't have it every day, or not to the same degree of magnitude, but there are certainly some times where I will feel it and I just want to have a nap. And if I'm in a situation where I do have a nap, and it works wonders, but sadly that's something that doesn't tend to be looked on particularly well in the office, at least as far as I can tell. So yeah, and it might happen immediately after lunch, or maybe it's not till 3 o'clock in the afternoon. But if you can feel that you are slumping, are there kind of like, the red buttons you can push to help yourself get out of that?
Yeah, I mean, if you have to stay in the workforce and you're at that state, I mean, one other thing to know is that awareness, that you realize, yes, this is a hard time, so that you could prime yourself and look and see what you've given yourself metabolically at lunch. Like, did you give yourself a protein or something that would help last hours rather than quick carbohydrate that'll, just go right to sugar, which will then make us tired in a few hours. So that's good, is to look kind of ahead of time, a couple hours before what happened. And then also remember, the brain is that busy parent. It's already doing a lot of things. So if you've had a big day where you had a lot of heavy meetings, you might need to give it more and shield it, like we're talking about with this CLE pattern. But yeah, some quick things are deep breaths, because the more oxygen that's coming into the brain, it tells the brain that we're safe. So that generally puts us in a bigger idea, that's our higher thinking level. So 3 very deep breaths, that can help. Furry pets help. Cats and dogs, they put us in more of a positive state. And then recalling something positive is a quick fix right before you go into a meeting. And then also thinking of someone you could praise that day, like who did something really great. If you're a parent or at work, on your team, just thinking in the positive sense and looking for something, someone you could tell they did a great job or good job, that will change your brain's setting. Whatever we focus on gets bigger, they say, right? So if we're focusing on positive things, and that will get bigger in our lens, right? So those are quick fixes.
Okay, so if I'm in that state, I could try and recollect, I don't know, something that my daughter did that made me proud of her, and that might help me get out the slump.
Absolutely. A teacher that really helped, a mentor, right? Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. It's a quick fix. A deep breath really works because it changes the chemicals in the brainstem, which tells us that we're safe. And that really helps us to turn on our prefrontal cortex, which is the front part of the brain that helps us come up with big ideas.
I'm always looking at ways that employers can help support their employees. And one thing that I've often thought is nap time necessarily a bad thing? it doesn't have to be very long. I find that myself, literally 10 minutes of lying down can make the world of difference. Would a far-sighted modern employer embrace that kind of thing is helpful and make allowance or even encourage it?
Well, it'd be interesting for the listeners to tell us, how many places do have nap rooms? There are employers with nap rooms, and that goes way back. I know one of my brothers worked for a company in Seattle, 30 years ago, had nap rooms. There are employers who embrace this, and actually they let them have a lot of freedom, the employees, and they actually said they worked harder, and they left it up to the employees. But there's some interesting studies to show, if we treat ourselves again, like if we are neurobiologic, like we have this organ that it is going 24/7, but there are some things we need to know about it and to take care of it and support it. So if it needs a rest, all the better.
I'm aware that we've talked about quite a lot in your framework, and that it can seem a little bit overwhelming when you've got all the things that you can work on. So what's a good first step, do this thing first, that someone listening can take?
I would say if you're setting your schedule on Sunday and you think of CLE, so connections, just look at your what you have planned for yourself during the week. Is there somebody that you really enjoy connecting with, or a new connection that you can make? And then under lifestyle, maybe, assess. Maybe you're doing it great. Maybe you sleep well, you're eating well, you're moving regularly, then congratulate yourself, reward yourself for that. And then the emotional processing, just list a couple emotions 3 times a day for 1 week. It's just awareness. We're not fixing anything. We're just being aware, because you may then be able to prime your day according to your emotional patterns, which would, in the long run, I would think, help your productivity, is what the literature suggests.
You've certainly given us a lot to think about. If someone does want to explore this kind of subject any further, you've mentioned literature. Are there good primers which you can recommend people start with?
Yes, I've been really enjoying a book called Big Potential by Shawn Achor. He is a Harvard researcher, a happiness researcher, who went through 2 years of depression, which is ironic, and he shares a lot about that. And I think his insights and his research are very illustrative, and he makes it very understandable, Shawn Achor. And then Simon Sinek, I'm always a fan of, especially The Infinite Game, talking about how we keep work interesting for the long run, which is on a lot of people's minds these days.
Absolutely. And how can people find you? Where would you like them to go?
Yeah, so you can find us on brainopsgroup.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn, Mary Rensel. Yeah, so we'd love to connect.
I'll put links to those in the show notes, as always. Well, Mary, thank you very much. You've given us a fair few things to think about, but hopefully some practical changes that people can make if they feel they need to their lifestyle. So, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Stay well. My pleasure.
Okay, hope you enjoyed that interview with Dr. Mary Rensel. This was one of those interviews which represents the fact that there very rarely is a silver bullet. There's not this one magic trick which you can use to get rich quick, or to have the perfect healthy lifestyle, or to look after your brain. I'm guessing that a lot of what Mary said when we were talking about looking after your brain, particularly from a lifestyle perspective, was probably quite familiar to you. You know that there are benefits to eating well. You know that there are benefits to getting a decent night's sleep. You know that there are benefits to doing exercise. You were probably aware that having social connections, that having interactions with people was important for your mental well-being, and so your brain. And I think quite often we overlook that easy stuff. We're so busy looking for these innovative solutions, these quick wins, and yes, quick wins exist, but very often they're based around something which you knew about anyway. Having said that, I'll bet many people don't do the sort of awareness, the emotional processing that Mary was talking about. I know that journaling sometimes gets mentioned, and we've talked about it on the podcast in previous episodes. But a practical 3 times a day check-in, how am I feeling? It's not something that I've previously done, but I can see that it is quite a useful exercise just to check in and consciously be aware of what is going on in your brain. So, lots of practical tips for you to take away. The show notes for this episode are at changewhatlife.com/145. That's changewhatlife.com/145 for episode 145. And I've said it before, I'll say it again, but it would help me enormously if you would leave a review for the podcast, preferably on Apple Podcasts, as that's where most podcast reviews get found. I was reflecting when I'm choosing something to buy on Amazon or somewhere like that, how much I rely on reviews, how much I take time to look at what people have said about a particular product. And the same is equally true of podcasts. There's a huge amount of content out there, and it's by seeing a positive review that someone's going to know that this podcast is worth a listen. So if the podcast is something which you found helpful and you'd like to share that with others, then do please take some time to leave a review on Apple Podcasts. If you go to changewhatlife.com/Apple, that's changewhatlife.com/Apple, then that'll take you to the Apple Podcasts page where you can leave your review. In 2 weeks' time, we're revisiting a subject which I haven't talked about in any great detail in recent podcast episodes, and that's the whole idea around starting your own business as a means to change career. The trouble with starting your own business is that you don't always know whether or not your idea is going to succeed. So what about if you could start a business where you knew that there was already a proven track record? That's what we're going to talk about in 2 weeks' time when we discover the world of franchising and what it's like to buy a franchise. It's a great interview, so make sure you've subscribed to the show if you haven't already, and I can't wait to see you then. Cheers. Bye.